The leveling. Married for 24 years, dated for 3 years exclusively, I think, before our marriage. So, we've been together for more than 25 years. I've never been unfaithful or straight in any way. Just her. Back in 2016, my wife had a 3-month ENP with a married friend of ours, a father of another child at our youngest child's school. My wife at first tried to minimize this as a 6-week affair, but the text and phone call records indicate it was a 3-month affair. They had unprotected affair in our home when I was out of town for a business trip. She also insists this was the one and only time and that she never provided him with oral or anything else. Don't they all say this crap? She refused to let me see the texts between them. There was lots of heavy petting, deep kissing, and secret meetups in cars, at her work and elsewhere. Dates involving our kids. Just last fall, I learned from her that she'd brought over to our house for dinner, almost playing house several times during the affair while I was out of town. My wife went on hard mode gaslighting me during the affair, which included her convincing me for a time that I'd falsely accused her and her invoking an in-home separation. I finally gathered enough evidence via VAR. I still have to see the OM several times a month, sometimes several times in a week, all over the town we live. We still live in the same home. Last fall, I laid down ultimatums and got her to go to IC, as well as provide a written timeline and submit to a polygraph. Doing the polygraph and the drama leading up to it was a crap show. She failed the polygraph. Definitive fail according to the examiner. I didn't get a parking lot confession. Since then, I've been focused on paying down our debt, also dealt with a heart attack scare in the winter brought on by stress. My heart is fine, by the way. Lockdown has led to being in a kind of stasis, but I'm looking at my options and thinking quite clearly now. That's where we are. 1. It's our debt together. I played a nice role in helping to accumulate it. She's not a big spender and never has been. 2. I want to pay it off together. I don't want to walk away with half of this debt. I want to walk away with 0 of it. 3. 2 debt-free divorced parents is going to be a hell of a lot healthier for everyone, including our kids. 4. She and I make almost the same level of income. We're doing well. She actually is probably going to make more than me this year. 5. If I had divorced her 4 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case. She made quite a bit less, and I'd probably be paying alimony and child support now. I don't regret staying and trying to work on reconciliation. It allowed me calm down and get some things straight, and I can say I really tried. 5a. Now we have 1 kid out of the nest, and only 1 kid is now a dependent. Now that she makes as much or more than me, alimony is less likely. 50/50 custody split is much more likely. Child support isn't an issue with a 50/50 split where I live, etc. 6. No, I haven't seen an attorney yet. That's the only thing I haven't done, really, at this point. 7. I'm inclined to think that both the person I'm seeing now and the person who gaslighted me and betrayed me are both the real woman I'm married to. It's possible to sustain love bombing for a while, but difficult to do for more than 3 years in my view. She hasn't love bombed, and while everything she did was horrible, along with dragging her feet on transparency and the polygraph, she's also done a lot, as she should have done. 8. I'm not defending her, I just tend to be somewhat objective about this more than I used to. It's probably one thing that has kept me engaged in the marriage, to be honest. And maybe that's a deficit on my part. I don't like being one of those anonymous posters who provides everyone a one-sided view. Maybe it's my professional background. She has shown what many consider to be remorseful behavior and has done many things over and above what even remorseful spouses do. This is over and against her other behaviors and words. The two sets of facts conflict with each other, like a person really at war with themselves. She's also done and said a lot of crappy things in the first year after D-Day, really gobsmacking statements that would make the neck hairs stand up here, I suspect, that she later retracted. For example, she tried to say I was immature because I couldn't understand that it was just meaningless bonding with her AP, or she said once that the texts were private. Just a sample. And she's done a lot to emphasize the clear suspicion she's not being fully truthful and transparent by burying evidence, dragging her feet on the polygraph, failing the polygraph, and more. I'm not blind to any of these facts. I'll also say that weirdly, there's a possibility she's telling the truth now, and she insists she is, which would be truly tragic. Why is this possible, and perhaps even probable? Because while it was a 3-month affair, 1. The first 5 to 6 weeks were much more of a not just friends situation with an escalation of phone calls and lengthy convos. 2. Her schedule is pretty tightly circumscribed. We live and work in the same suburb. There weren't that many opportunities for them to get up to no good. 3. I became suspicious early on, and while I didn't get the goods until December, she was dealing with a husband who was already freaking out and beside himself all through November. In one of the convos I captured, the AP is worried and very nervous because he knows I'm suspicious and he can't figure out how I've been able to track down certain information. So, there's a chance she's telling the truth. Of course, what I know is awful enough. In truth, in some ways I allowed myself to be cajoled into staying, and once a certain amount of time passed, I reached that plane of lethal flatness phase where a BH feels obligated in some ways to try to reconcile. Now, I don't regret staying for many of the reasons I already outlined. But I also want to be truthful here. I have prayed occasionally for a mulligan, like I catch her up to no good again, so I can just walk with a clean conscience. Has she gone completely NC with her AP? Yes, I haven't monitored her in about 2 years, but the danger of reigniting is so low as to be non-existent. Have you stopped funding her by separating your finances? No, we're still married. We are not separated and ostensibly working on reconciliation. There would be no reason to do that other than if I had announced I was done reconciling. We went through the multi-week Trueveil this spring, which I did find helpful for a variety of reasons. Have you disclosed her infidelity to her and your families, friends, AP's spouse, etc.? Yes, but not to my family. I felt it was important to not drag my family into it. If I decided to, would just make it harder. As far as all of our friends, no. Several of my close friends know. None of our couple friends know. Please find your rage. No problem there. I found it so well I had a false heart attack scare earlier this year. My stepfather was an abusive messed up. I am very dubious of giving into rage. I spend a lot of time in the Iron Temple working it out of my body. You need to put your own happiness first. There are a million great women out there. Don't sit around hoping things will get better while you waste valuable time finding a real wife. I do know this. I've been lucky the past couple of years to receive lots of female attention, which certainly alleviates the early feeling of emasculation and not being worthy. Maybe it's a silver fox thing I've got going. In any case, while I haven't acted on any of it, there are clearly lots of women in their 20, 30, and 40 who find me attractive, and I likewise find them attractive. I know that the clock is ticking. I'll be 50 this year. She sent a text in my presence and blocked his number. The text first said, "My husband knows about our emotional affair," and then I made her change that to "My husband knows everything. You are now blocked. Do not contact me again." Even though I didn't know everything and she was still trying to sell an Ian only, at least I had the presence of mind to do this. Keep in mind I hadn't read anything at all on how to handle cheaters other than reading about how to use VAR. Then I made her call her sister and her mom and tell them that very night. In my presence. A lot of people said R is a long painful road with no guarantees. Also, the couples at Marriage Help, who run it, have all been through hell and back and all seem to love each other. I just always wondered if the husbands in the female infidelity situations were settling. I don't want to settle. So, during Marriage Help, which last week's, my doubts were profound. Someone asked what I meant about a clean conscience. As a Christian, you will understand the weight one feels if you feel you're having a hard time forgiving. Or if you're sitting next to your wife praying at the center but a part of you is just doubting you'll ever get past it. I'm not confusing forgiving with staying. And I'm not sure I've forgiven her anyway. I think I mostly have, but if there's still resentment and anger and doubt, that doesn't seem forgiving. The young ones, one is 10 going into 5th grade. The other just graduated from high school and is going into college. Apparently, research shows one is the worst age for parents to divorce for kids. I didn't know this 3 years ago, obviously. I think it's possible to reconcile. I'm becoming increasingly skeptical it can be all that deep or satisfying as some people try to sell it. I think these cases of stronger, better bionic marriages must be exceedingly rare. How can something so toxic make anything better? At the same time, I think divorce is likely equally as painful, certainly more impoverishing, and more than likely bad for children in most cases. So, it's truly the horns of a dilemma for people like me. I think that accounts for POLF more than anything else. Revenge affair. I actually brought this up once in a cruel way I can do, obviously not serious. The look on her face was interesting. A few times she's accused me of revenge cheating, which I haven't done. And she's gotten jealous of female colleagues as well. And she has gotten jealous about female attention I receive in general. A few weeks ago, we were at a restaurant with another couple. I started talking about a Netflix series and the restaurant manager overheard me, very attractive early 30s. She started wanting to talk to me, started ordering me drinks she wanted me to try, until it became uncomfortable for even our couple friends, and they started joking about it. I kept trying to involve my WW and the other couple in the convo, but the manager wasn't having it and kept asking when we would be back. I don't encourage, and I wasn't flirting, just sitting there. Anyway, I think she's pretty well aware I could be dating another woman in about 20 minutes if we split. Let's distinguish between possibilities and probabilities. It is possible my WW is still unfaithful. It's not probable. That's not denial, that's cold-eyed realism. Do you guys have the impression I don't know what's up here and that I've got some kind of illusions? For crying out loud, I'm planning to divorce her. Is that not clear? I had an appointment with an attorney before the heart scare, put that on hold and changed course because I decided I wanted to pay off debt. My decision. Because it's what I want, not her decision. If I had done what the crowd here recommends 3 years ago, I'd be in a much worse situation financially and otherwise. Now I have a child leaving the nest and the ability to establish favorable divorce terms. I don't know what's confusing about this. As for trying to convince me an affair is ongoing, really think it is extremely unlikely that the affair continued. I'm not naive on this front. I do random pop-ins on her all the time to bring her a Coke, etc. I also will occasionally change my plans at the last minute by canceling an out-of-trip town or rescheduling a meeting in town. Oh, I had to reschedule. Let's grab a drink, so there's no rhyme or reason to my schedule. There's very little she can anticipate. I don't share my schedule with her. And there isn't any rhyme or reason. Because of what I do, it's pretty haphazard because I telecommute and am home and only 2 miles away from her business. So, I might be home, I might be working at the coffee shop across the street from her office, I might be in the city for a meeting, or I might not be. You can never tell. Her daily schedule, on the other hand, is pretty tightly circumscribed, and she is pretty much locked down in one place all day long. I also have access to this schedule and can cross-check it. She can't just get up and leave. Most of the shuttling of kids and so forth is left to me for that reason. She works with her sister, who was devastated and angry with her. Her sister has been an ally of mine and a confidant until recently with the polygraph. If the affair had continued after D-Day, I would have found about it most likely. I cannot imagine my Sil would be consenting to allowing an affair to continue in her own state of mind, feeling betrayed by her sister, but again, it's possible. I'm not trying to make it sound like I'm babysitting her all the time. I'm not. It's just that things are organically baked in a way that would make it harder for her to do that. The reason she was able to have an affair before in these circumstances is because I was naive and trusting. I never thought my sweet, Christian wife would do such a thing. I know with a reasonable degree of certainty my Sil would not tolerate the coming to the workplace like before, when she considered him a friend who was just there as a client. She would also know my WW's comings and goings. If it was continuing, she'd have to be a master super spy at this point. She is at home with me every evening. There have been a handful of GNO with a group of friends who don't know about it and wouldn't approve, and I've actually been along for those nights in any case because she wanted me to go for accountability. There have not been many, if any, opportunities for her to continue. I realize burner phones are extremely hard to locate. I haven't monitored with a VAR since the affair, but I've thought about doing it recently just as a check-in. I am willing to concede that she may have circled back around with him in the early days of shock, but his OBS also knew at that point, and my WW's mother knew, my Sil knew. The affair was exposed. The affair went on before all of that because I'd never seen what infidelity looks like before. We have a tight community. Now I know. Also, I was suspicious almost immediately, but it just took a little time to get the evidence. I still travel for work, although not since the pandemic, but I've also taken care of things on that front while I'm away. Additionally, my older child was suspicious when it was going on and confided to a friend about it. I don't fault my older child, who was only turning 15 at the time. My older child is not naive for her age now, either, or went through a period of being very angry with her mother. If my WW were doing suspicious things while I was gone from the home, again I would most likely know about it. Sure, my WW could have learned how to take affairs underground, but the chance of physical contact is extremely low. I've thought about potential blind spots for me. I feel like those have been addressed. There's no popping out to the corner store at 11 at night like we read in other threads. So, the chances of them having anything more than text, phone contact, on a burner phone, not on her phone which I have access to, are slim, but I suppose it's possible. The chances of physical contact are even slimmer. So, then we're left with, would an underground affair continuing for an additional 3 years via text on a burner phone? It seems unlikely. My mother-in-law has been a strong ally and has continued to support me and has not circled the wagons. She was also suspicious of my WW and has expressed several times how she wished she'd said something to me or told her daughter to get her head on straight. She didn't and regrets it. Now, of course, she's keyed in as well. Again, a tight familial community. If she had seen something, it is unlikely at this point she would be looking the other way. She only once scolded me after taking my WW to the ER last fall, and then immediately apologized and was mortified a few days later when I sat her down over coffee and laid out all the gory details. She obviously has an interest in keeping the family together but has been nothing but supportive of me and has said whatever I decide I'll always be welcome in her home. She's actually a dream mother-in-law and always has been. I actually know this isn't stupid because of how she treated one of her other son-in-laws whose marriage broke up. She was nothing but kind to him and had him over constantly for dinners without the daughter, or stepdaughter in that case. I'm not trying to make my mother-in-law sound like a saint, but she's really been an incredible bulwark for me the past several years, and that has not changed. I know others have bad experiences with in-laws circling the wagons around their daughter. I have not. My WW sat down with our oldest child and talked to that child about the affair. She didn't go into all the details but made it clear it was a physical affair, that she had devastated me and endangered the family and was now going to work on the marriage. The child knows who the OM is and how long it went on. Look, I have the feeling when I share that kind of context you guys are under the impression I'm trying to do a look what she did in the plus column of the ledger. I'm not. What I am doing, however, is trying to provide the most complete picture I can with context. And in not getting a really complete picture from an anonymous poster like me, so I strive to be fair in the sense of a reporter trying to be objective and report the facts. I'm not pro R or pro D. I'm in limbo trying to decide the best thing to do for my kids and my long-term happiness, and when to do it. I also did a thorough search several times for a burner phone in all the usual places. The only place I cannot look is her own office. She may have it there. She could also be an agent for Al-Qaeda. And how easy is it to set up dummy email accounts, social media accounts, and use anonymous texting apps and then delete them and reinstall them? The cat and mouse game can get pretty endless. I could chase after all of that stuff forever. I pretty much have stopped doing that earlier last year. The papers, probably closer to the end of the first semester for my daughter. I'm fairly confident she will be moving out of the house at the end of her first semester of college and will not feel as tied and more adult. This would seem to make it somewhat easier, I hope. There's also the pandemic to consider, and possible additional lockdowns. If that hasn't entered into anyone's equations, I would recommend that it should. Exactly who's the realist here? And to others, hell yes, I'm conflicted. If you're not conflicted after nearly 25 years of marriage and what you thought was building a life together, something is wrong with you. Being conflicted and sad about divorce is not the same as not moving forward with it. We discussed divorce after her failed polygraph. Then the heart attack scare happened almost right after. So yes, she knows divorce is on the table. Yes, she's an attractive woman, especially for her age approaching 50. She looks easily no older than 40. I have no doubt she'll move on. I'm no slouch myself. I'm not pedestalizing her and know I am attractive to women, so I'm not feeling insecure. I do feel terrified about the very clear empirical data that is out there about what divorce does to kids. And speaking of denial, anyone who doesn't acknowledge this is definitely in denial. The data on this is pretty voluminous. I don't have time to GTS for you, but check around. There has been some recent research about divorce in younger years being less harmful. Also, some research but not much indicating that yes, possibly divorce is not as traumatic if both parents do a good job co-parenting. Yes, which age is the worst from a research standpoint? 10, 11th. The age of my youngest. So yeah, kids tend to blame themselves at that age and take on the guilt. Thing is that our household is not dysfunctional day to day. I'm living here, so I can say with a high degree of reliability. So, it will be a shock to the system, especially for my youngest. There's also a lot of evidence about the need for a father, nota bene, not two mommies, just saying. Again, denying empirical evidence won't win any points with me on this. I wrote out a divorce letter to her about a week ago, haven't shared that yet obviously. I'm looking at our debt and calculating how quickly we can be free of it. My plan is that we both each have our own car payments to take care of, but nothing else. We can sell the house easily since we've done work on it. And it has a nice big backyard and a pool. So, we'd each walk away with a chunk of equity from that. Since she makes as much as me, and possibly more this year, she should get no alimony. 50-50 split on one kid is no child support in my state. Yes, my faith has been renewed. It suffered the past couple of years. But as someone else here pointed out, the New Testament is quite clear on adultery and marriage. I do think it will harm my children. I do think divorce causes harm. So, does staying in a miserable relationship. I'm conflicted, no doubt. But at some point, I'm going to have crap or get off the pot. If I cannot feel that real reconciliation is possible, then living a half-life is not going to cut it for me long term. We also have Life 360 and she is on that as well. She also sends me pictures if she is going somewhere to confirm. She started doing that early on without my asking. Same with sharing on the phone. The phone is open to me whenever I want it. She also checks in throughout the day via text and always lets me know if she's going somewhere, like to leave to pick up a soft drink or something. And I can watch her in real time. This is all reassuring, of course, but as others have pointed out, she could be a super spy and conducting an affair still. I doubt it. We are on the muted end of the spectrum with a high-functioning household. I know that sounds strange, but it is true. Just this last weekend we had an entire household of nieces and nephews and my siblings and their spouses. None of these people have a clue. Our couple friends will be devastated by the news. The divorce will come as a shock to everyone, my younger child, our close friends, my family. They will all be blindsided by it. Also, that 15% number. That is a lot. I am surprised Scientific American minimized that so much. That is big. That is a lot of kids with fallout. I want to minimize trauma for my youngest as much as possible and ensure that as little changes materially for my youngest and for my oldest, now entering college. If I can manage that, and it is a smooth amicable parting, and we're not impoverished and we're functioning as good parents, that minimizes the damage. My WW has had a complicated relationship with God based on being abandoned by her father at a young age. Like as in basically completely abandoned. She has found more faith as an adult, somewhat, although never as fervent as me, and she is now gravitating toward Catholicism. She is thinking of converting. I want that for her. I do like the idea of giving my kids a runway for this. My oldest already knows it's a possibility, so when the time is right, she will be given a heads up. My youngest will require a different kind of preparation, but I think what you suggest is very healthy. The idea of springing this on them makes me feel like vomiting when I picture it. Everyone else will just have to deal with the shock. My best stab at it is to say something like Mom had a boyfriend outside our marriage back when you were in the first grade. It was wrong. She knew it was wrong, and we have been trying to work on it since then. Unfortunately, a lot of times working on these kinds of things just doesn't help. Dad has been hurt by this, and the best thing is for Mom and Dad to be separate from each other and lead happy lives on our own, and we will be a better mom and dad to you because of that. You didn't cause any of this, and there's nothing you can do to fix it. What you need to do is focus on being the happiest and healthiest and best kid you can be. Mom and I both love you very much. Your mom is a very good mother, and we're both going to be here for you every step of the way as you grow up. I fell for the wait 6 months thing. Lots of people were telling me that. Don't make a rash decision. There's no hurry. I don't know where that comes from. I think if more people got advice right away to end it quickly, there would a lot swifter action and probably a lot less infidelity, to be honest. It would become a cultural pattern that if you screw around, your marriage ends in a flash. People would know that, and it would be more of a deterrent. There's just far too much sugarcoating and acceptance of it. There is definitely a part of me that wishes I had acted swiftly back in December of 16 and just ended it. I had nothing informing my decisions at the time of D-Day, nothing. I had read one post about how to set up a VAR, and that was it. I was on my own. I did some things right by exposing, and other things that landed me in limbo. However, like I said before, looking back on it, my financial situation and my situation relative to the divorce would be a lot different than it is likely to be now. Her family already knows. Like I said, they've been supportive. I'm under no illusions this continues once I announce we're divorcing. I think my sis-in-law will be angry and blame me for not forgiving. She has a hard distinguishing forgiveness from reconciliation and has always mixed the two. I think my mother-in-law will be hurt, but less angry, but also probably not wanting to talk to me for a while, or maybe ever. I do want to say I probably have had a unique experience with a supportive mother-in-law. When my WW failed the poly, she called her mom and told her it said she was lying. My 1049 brusquely said, "Well, did you? Are you?" and didn't talk to her for more than a week after that. So, it's not like my wife has been getting warm fuzzy from her sister and mother throughout this. Both of them feel betrayed by her too. The polygraph. 1. This started in August of 2019. I was feeling desperate and stuck, and I poured out my grief and anger in what became a pretty lengthy thread. 2. At that time, I gave my wife a series of ultimatums. Do an STD test. Symbolic at this stage, but whatevers. Start writing a narrative timeline and give it to me. Submit to a polygraph. Sign up with an IC who specializes in betrayal trauma. 3. Over several weeks in late August through mid-September, she began stepping up, or so I thought. She began by getting the STD test. Then she started writing her timeline. Then she signed up for IC and had her first appointment in late September 2019. 4. During this time period, she was very clear about agreeing to the polygraph. She went so far as to explicitly say at this time that she wanted me to set the appointment up when I'm ready, as she said she was aware of stories where WWs and WHs have tried to manipulate that process. 5. After her first IC appointment, she began steadily backing away from the commitment to do the poly, at first mentioning that the IC partners no longer did polys themselves. 6. Over the next several weeks we went on vacation and I had additional work travel, so no poly was scheduled. Then in late October, she began using the fact that our ICs did not do polys anymore themselves as a reason to delegitimize. 7. I knocked that out from under her by just asking my IC straight up if they had a problem with it. No, he said, and handed me the card of a reputable poly examiner. In late October 2019, I wrote that she is trying to use our therapist as a way to object, opting for the disclosure process instead. However, I have been clear about both, an approach for the disclosure and poly, and the therapists have no objection to this. They simply don't use polys themselves. 8. Then in early November 2019, things took a strange turn. When my WW had her panic attack at the therapist's office after I'd texted her, I was calling the poly examiner to discuss an appointment. 9. That night after her visit, she began using the panic attack as a reason to refuse the polygraph. I told her no one was forcing her to do it, but if she couldn't bring herself to do this simple thing for me, then we needed to separate. She said, "You're going to blow our marriage up over this," and then proceeded to deny, attack, and reverse victim me. Why was I doing this to her? Also saying that she's done everything else I've asked, so why am I drawing a line in the sand here? 10. I agreed to wait for the polygraph until after the disclosure process 2-hour session had been held. Because of the way our ICs conduct this, advance appointments with each of our ICs were necessary to prepare. 10a. Around this time, I saw the AP again for the first time that fall at a school program. I was triggered something awful by it. 11. Then in mid-December we had the 2-hour disclosure in which she read her timeline to me. As expected, no major new information, but a few interesting details I'd never heard before. 12. I then said right before Christmas I was ready to schedule the poly and I got a response. I'm unsure about that and will have to think about it. My response was no polygraph, no marriage. 13. She did the poly, but it was surrounded by drama in which she tried to criticize the examiner's credentials, tried to manipulate the question, begged and wailed and stalled. Finally, he got a result, and it was definitive that she failed on the question of physical more than one time. She passed on the question of physical part in our bedroom. These were carefully worded by the examiner to cover all the contingencies and wiggle room a wayward might try to get away with. So, I know beyond a reasonable doubt that she's lying about the extent of physical part during the affair, aren't they always? And that she manipulated a 3-month drama after I'd already waited 3 years asking for a polygraph on and off. My comment: follow the money. Infidelity is rampant. From my experience, most betrayed are easily deceived and manipulated, missing huge red flags. Once caught in a long-term affair, it was only emotional. It was only holding hands. It was only a hug. It was only once. It was only twice, ad infinitum. I personally have no doubt that most people who produce those scam infomercials at 3 a.m. are cheaters, and most people who buy it are betrayed. It's only money. Part 2 ending coming tomorrow morning. Hit that bell for the fastest update.